Well, so the question was, have I wrecked one? Yeah, I've wrecked one. So like, I don't know, from about 96 through 2003 or 4, I don't remember. I had a 1992, I believe is what that was, Glasair 1 RG. And I'd gotten a contract with the USDA. For you city guys, that's the United States Department of Agriculture. And I'd gotten a contract for them to survey 6 of the counties out here, basically the 6 counties surrounding Lubbock, Texas. And what I'd do is I'd go to 10,000 feet and take a picture of every square mile of the crops. And what they did with it was they would certify the cotton crops off of it for the farmers. The film was developed into slides, and they had actually a machine that projected down. They could draw around it and figure out how many acres the farmer had in cotton and that it was really there. So that's what they were doing with it. And the first year I did it in a 182. Me and Lyndall Askew did it. There's a story on that one. But he decided to move off down to Granbury, and which left me here to take care of the contract. So I took over the contract, and I thought, I need a really efficient way to do this, and just me, so I don't have to worry about if another guy's going to show up to run the camera or whatever. So I actually figured out the best and most efficient airplane to do it was a Long Easy, but I couldn't figure out how to operate the camera then. I mean, you're talking about the late 90s. Technology was a little different then, but I had a camera mount on a gimbal that held a 35 millimeter camera that took actual film. There was no chip in it or anything like that. Then you put slide film in it, and you'd actually take the picture. So when we did it with the 182, you'd actually look through. You actually had we had a TV with a camera looking through the camera that would project on the TV, so you could see what it was looking at, and then you manually took the picture. But I did figure out the Glasair, since it was side by side, the Glasair would easily, retractable gear Glasair would easily get up to 10,000 feet and run, 200 miles an hour, burning, I don't even remember, like 6.5 gallons an hour up there, something like that. And so I had, in this seat, I had a little platform built, had canisters for the film, had a laptop computer, had the county in it, gridded off with it, scanned in and then gridded off. And then I found one of the very first softwares available to interface a GPS with the PC that I had in there and the map software. So, and all I had was it was a little Garmin handheld, I think, and I had that thing interfaced with it, and so it would, put the little airplane on there, and I would basically at 10,000 feet, I'd cruise along there and fly through the grid lines on the computer. I'd watch that and watch the TV monitor, and whenever the section lines were squarely in the TV, I had a manual clicker, and I just click it and take the picture, and I'd stay up usually around 5 hours. I had just about 5 hours of fuel, and I think I'd stay up 4.5 hours and then coast on back into Lubbock from 10,000 feet. So I did that a long time, and I put, 850 hours on the airplane doing that. So I'd flown it a lot. But this gets into why I do not like experimental airplanes. There we go. I'm stepping on people's toes again. Particularly if you're not the guy that built it. They're all the same, but they're all different. They're all different from the firewall forward, and that was the case with this one. But what's scary about it is that I flew it 800 hours in all those years, and it took that long for the flaw to show up on how the engine was installed. Ultimately, it comes back on me because I was the one taking care of the airplane. But I'm like to think I'm nobody's fool. I mean, I had IAs looking behind me all the time. I'd roll it into Horton Aero when it was do any maintenance, and I'd do the maintenance and have those guys. We all became friends, and they're looking at it because you know, they cared about me, so they're looking at it too, making sure this thing is always in good shape, and just took immaculate care of the airplane. It was a beautiful airplane. But I had decided I was going to not do that anymore, and I decided I would sell the airplane. So I sold the airplane to a guy in Houston, and I had to be real picky about who I sold the airplane to, because I always had a lot of young pilots call, because it's a cool airplane, retractable gear, fast, fun to fly. My gosh, it was fun to fly. But you also knew that if something happened in it, you know, it could be a real handful. If it quit on you, it's going to come to the ground faster than a tri-pacer loaded with bricks. So I just had to be really careful. I had low-time pilots wanting to buy it, and I just wouldn't sell it to them. Finally found a guy that called from Houston, wanted to buy it. He had, I don't know, 300 or 400 hours. And I was like, okay. So I said, I'll sell it to you, and I'll do an annual inspection on it, and I'll deliver it to you. All right, so the deal's cut. We're ready to go. I do an annual on the airplane, and the carburetor, little airplane, giant prop, a lot of vibration. So the carburetor had just a lot of wear in it from all the vibration up there. So I pulled the carburetor off, sent it off, had it overhauled, brought it back, put it on the airplane. Had the IAs really look at this thing, look it over, and it's all good, let's go. So put it back together. I'll never forget, I laid a rag on the wing when I got in the airplane, so I don't have any footprints on it. And I'm delivering the airplane from Lubbock to Houston to deliver it to the guy. And there used to be a little, we had 17 left and 35 right, and it's still there in Lubbock. They just don't use it anymore, it's closed, but I operated off of that runway constantly. So I pulled out there and pour the coals to it, and get just airborne. And that little thing, it come off the ground running about 80, 85. It would come off the ground, and you just really needed to get it cleaned up as quick as you could. Just start getting it cleaned up and go, because that was just the best way to fly the airplane. It's just a little hot rod. And so I, got positive ready to climb, and it's a short runway, so gear coming up. And about the time I heard the gear hit and it would retract the gear pretty fast. So about the time I heard the gear coming up, it just stone cold quit. And I was probably about hangar high, and the scary part about it that I remember was I came to the ends of the straps. I mean, it was absolutely, that prop was like throwing a piece of plywood out in front of that thing. And ended up in the cotton field just beyond the airport. And there's some of it I remember, and some of it just happened so fast, and this is where instinctual flying and training just kicks in. I use the rudders to keep it level, and because it immediately was too slow. I don't really remember doing this, but I had several people. There was an Lubbock International Airport Board meeting, and they had just gotten out, and they're actually on a 2-story balcony at Lubbock International, and watched it happen. And they said, yeah, man, they said, you pushed the nose over, and we thought you were going to hit the fence at the end of the runway. I said, you just flew it to the runway and then pulled back and went over the fence. And I do remember going over the fence, and I do remember pulling the nose up, because my vision was always, one of these things quits on me, I'm gonna fly that thing right down in there, right into ground effect, and just feather her right into that cotton field, just slide it in. That's my plan. And no, that thing came down like a sack of bricks. And I remember pulling the nose up to flare, and those guys confirmed. They're like, dude, you pulled the nose up, it didn't change anything. That thing just hit the ground. Interesting, that airplane had control rods, no cabling, so it had control rods directly to the stick, which is why it's fun to fly. But I remember the first cotton boll that hit the aileron out there, boom, came through the stick. It's funny how you remember things like that. But I remember it coming through, and that thing hit, and the cotton was, of course, this tall, and you're talking about a little bitty short airplane with no landing gear under it. So I just land in this forest of cotton, and that thing hit. It immediately turned sideways, and I'm probably running 100, 120, and turned sideways, and it's going across the furrows, and I slid. It was like 300 feet or something like that through that. So that scene in The Aviator where DiCaprio lands in that vegetable field, and all that stuff's going past him. I'm like, dude, when I saw that at the theater, I was like, been there, done that, you know. And we got stopped, and I was okay. It just really shook me up about how quick it happened and how you're not ready for it. And it just, well, that training and instinctual flying, knowing how to fly the airplane and being able to just do it under pressure, I just did it, you know. And that was a scary thing. But yeah, so the fire department's not supposed to come outside the perimeter fence, but back in the day, in the 90s and early 2000s, we were friends with the firemen. We were friends with the people in the tower. Everybody had worked there forever, so they came outside to help me. And I found out that if you wreck a Glasair in Lubbock, Texas at 11:45, it is perfect for the news team to get out there to get you on the news at 12 o'clock. So I had to call my wife, tell her, look, I'm fixing to be on the news. Don't, you know, I'm fine. All those things. Had to call my mom. Of course, you know, the FAA guys were like, the media was being held over there probably, I don't know, 100 yards, 200 yards away out of this farmer's field. And they said, would you like to talk to the press? And I'm like, no, keep them over there. So fortunately, I didn't have to talk to them. But you know, it really didn't damage the airplane that bad, and it was listed as an incident. So technically speaking, I haven't had an accident. That was a fun process because, but I learned a lot. You learn so much. You know, I'd flown that airplane, as I said before, around 850 hours, and I always sumped it. I always did, you know, all the pre-flight stuff before I took off in it. And I'll never forget the FSDO guy asking me, said, did you sump the airplane? I said, yeah, absolutely. I sump it every time before I fly. And this is where you don't realize your mind's in shock. You just don't realize, which was very surprising to me, because then he asked me that he followed that up immediately with, well, what's the procedure on sumping this? And I could not tell him how to sump the airplane. I just had to look at him and say, you know what, I guess I'm so bumfuzzled in the head, I have no idea, I can't tell you. And he's like, okay, you know, I'll ask you about it later. And of course later I remembered how. I mean, talk about crazy. But yeah, so that was my crash story. The Fed process was what happened. The next interesting part was I was also the A&P that signed it off. So the next day I get to do an interview with them. And so what had happened was when I took the carburetor off and put it back on, and this is back to that amateur build, you know, and amateur maintenance apparently. So fuel ran down to an ADEL clamp, and you just, it's one of those things that the ADEL clamp where it is attached to the engine mount, and I never saw it, never noticed that someone, when they built the airplane, that ADEL clamp was a little too large for that piece of tubing, and the tubing was black, the ADEL clamp was black, and they used black tape, and they put that on there to tighten it up. And that clamp, that ADEL clamp, held the mixture control cutoff cable for the carburetor. And when I took that carburetor all apart, fuel ran down that cable, got on that ADEL clamp, melted the tape, and that melted, it just, when I stuck it all back together, it moved maybe that much. Well, the nose gear would come past that cable. So letting it move that much, the nose gear came through, grabbed the cable, and of course did not twist it to full rich. It went to full lean. Shut the airplane off. So there you go. That's how it happens.